Hello, and welcome to today's podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host, and today I'm very happy to be joined by Karen Millon, who has written a wonderful book that she shared with me. It's called An Amazing Divorce. For those of you who are listening on the podcast, I'm holding a picture up of the book, and I love the cover, Karen, because it's a picture of you, and it's such a happy picture. Just looking at the cover of the book makes you think you can have an amazing divorce. So, first, let me just say thank you so much for taking the time and joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Susan. I'm so honored.
Well, it's you and I have I've been seeing you on my listeners are so used to hearing this because I find so many of my friends and guests on Instagram, but I found you and connected with you through Instagram. Your tag is Healin, Healin. Wait, Healin with Karen?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. And so, and I noticed your posts. I always notice positive posts, and always notice people who are trying to put out positivity and healing and a good vibe into the world. So that's how I originally noticed you. And then when your book came out and we connected and were able to talk about it, and then I read the book, I knew I had to have you on the show. So I very much appreciate this. And I'm happy that we're talking about this today. You and I were just talking, and we're going to be talking about the healing process. And I mentioned to you that I'm so happy we're talking about it because I think most people, when they think of healing, they think of something happens, then you start healing from it. And in fact, when you read your book and you hear your journey, you realize that healing, one, is just a never ending process. It's something that we are always going to be dealing with in our life. But when you're coming into a divorce or something traumatic like this, the healing can actually start long before the divorce process or the separation process even starts, let alone needing to wait until it's over. So it really makes me happy to be able to bring this to my listeners. You just mentioned to me as well that you've become a healing coach. I'd love for you to just talk about what's involved in that.
Yes. It's interesting you talked about healing before something as traumatic as a divorce. Um, Healing is a journey, and it's a journey that for the large majority of us starts in childhood. Most of the time, as well intentioned and as loving, as caring as our parents are, just by default of how they were raised or what their upbringing was, we start internalizing a lot of messages and a lot of beliefs about ourselves. So, in my example, I had loving parents who worked a lot, like most of us are working a lot, career, they're professionals, engineers, psychologists, actually, professor at a university, always busy, always marking exams, always preparing for her next lecture. And when you grow up feeling lonely and not seen and abandoned, and today with society, with our phones, we're always on our phones and our kids are beside us. And even in COVID, we feel like we're there because we're cooking and we're cleaning and we're working and we're all Zooming, but not giving our children a lot of attention creates feelings of I'm not worthy, I'm not a priority, I'm not important enough, I'm not seen, I'm not heard. So a lot of these beliefs we carry through adulthood. And as successful as we may be and as much as we can achieve, they drive who we are and who we marry and why we stay in marriages. And so something that was really helpful to me was, the minute that you feel that you're stuck, that you're not happy, that you're perhaps dealing with something you don't want to be dealing with or you don't deserve, starting your healing journey and going to therapy or being really aware of why you're feeling that and how is this manifesting in your life and what are you doing to conceal it or resist it. It's sort of the first start of the healing journey. And I think that a lot of us, especially in our society today, work really hard to neglect and resist. And okay, I'm feeling sad and lonely. I'm going to drink. I'm going to work out. I'm going to work really hard. I'm going to study harder. I'm going to prepare for the next sales pitch or whatever we're working on. and we neglect our need to heal. So in with the coaching, what I do is sort of combine a lot of my business background in creating a clarity and a vision and a mission, and what are your values and what drives you to make the decisions you need to have, as well as what's holding you back. What are all those negative beliefs? Tell me a bit about your past, about growing up, and identifying those negative beliefs so that you can heal them. And part of the offering that I do is that I match you with the right therapist, whether it's EMDR, somatic experiencing, or just therapy, so that you can heal that, heal it quickly, and fly. And then find the love you deserve, find the career you want, ask for the promotion that you deserve, and sort of move ahead.
Yeah, well, and I think we don't realize how much what happens in our childhood, or the experiences of our early life play into our relationships and just how we walk through life as adults. My friend Beth McCormick just posted something the other day on Instagram that I thought was so insightful, and it just something you said reminded me of it. If you don't heal the hurts from your childhood, they're going to play out in your romantic relationships. And that just like for me was like, oh my God, is that so true? But most of us, what you just said, we stuff it down. We say, well, I wasn't abused, I wasn't neglected, I was fed, I was educated, I had everything I could need or not. So obviously it's not something from my childhood, but we all carry things forward. And it does us no good not to deal with that, not to acknowledge it and heal from that. Um, so one of the things, I guess one of the things that I would wonder is, and you kind of referenced it, how do you know that you still have some unhealed uh, things from your past that do need to be dealt with? Is it when you're feeling stuck in your personal life, or where things are not going the way that you want them to be going? Or is it just that general sense of I'm not feeling good?
So the minute that you have all of the above, whenever you feel like you're stuck at work, you want a promotion, you want to ask for a raise, you want to and you can't get the guts to ask for what you deserve, when you're stuck in an unhappy marriage where you're not heard or seen, or putting up with abusive language or whatever it is, and as well as in parenting, anytime you have a trigger, anytime you are overreacting or you're feeling a little more heated than you would otherwise feel, that means there's an area that needs to be healed. And if you look back and say, okay, this is how I'm feeling, and in a scale to 1 to 10, how stressed, how anxious, how potent that feeling is, when was the last time I felt this way? For example, if you get really upset because people show up late on a date or on an appointment or on a Zoom meeting, and if you're like, okay, no, that's fine, she's probably caught up or had to go to the bathroom or whatever, or if you feel really angry, and this is so disrespectful, and how dare she, and my time is valuable. Like when you feel like you're just overreacting, there's an area of healing. And for example, in that small event, if you look back and then you look back at your childhood, maybe your parents were always late to pick you up from school, right?
Right.
Maybe this is something that you've suffered, and sometimes it's not even your parents. One bully at school, one bad teacher, someone that made you feel that you're not good enough, you're not lovable, you're not great, you're not smart enough. That's enough to carry a whole lifetime of suffering from having internalized all those feelings. So um yes, every time you feel trigger, every time you feel stuck in a marriage, stuck in a relationship, stuck with a friendship, um yeah,
Well,
it's an
and
area that needs healing.
stuck is such a great word, right? You hear the word stuck, and it almost is one of those words almost that feels like what it is, right? Stuck. You're just in that spot. And it's interesting. You mentioned the bully thing, and I had a former business partner who mentioned, as a child, she had been bullied for being different. from her peers on the playground, sort of thing. And that it manifested itself as an adult into her almost becoming a bully, almost having an attitude of, I don't need you, I can do anything myself, which frankly harmed her in her business relationships and probably personal relationships. Because we all do need other people. We all do need to be loved and accepted. And instead, she found herself pushing people away so that didn't have a chance to hurt her. Right.
Right.
So, that's a simple example of how something can carry forward. This is a very successful person, but
Yes.
who was a very lonely person as well.
And it's interesting that is a trauma response from a fight or flight. So her coping mechanism as a child was to be stronger and tougher and become the bully. Some people have a fawn response where they become, they don't want conflict, they don't want to be seen, they don't want to be heard. And so they're all being aware of all this and how you're responding, because exactly, we all want to be seen, we all want to be heard, we all want to be loved. And these are just coping mechanisms that are being a perfectionist or a workaholic is a very classic trauma response from avoiding pain,
Yeah.
avoiding feeling lonely and feeling sad and feeling rejected, or actually the workaholics that need validation by, okay, I created this podcast was amazing, I need the next best podcast. Or you get an A+ on your exam, you need another A+. And is this because you only feel loved and worthy by validation? Because innately you did not feel loved or good enough.
Right.
So you
And
have
it's
to
an
get more
external.
and more. And I see it, I went to business school. All of my friends are very successful business people, entrepreneurs. And, I have so many friends that I see this so clearly. I know their background, I know their parents, I know how they grew up. And this is very clear. Or if you have Catholic guilt and you're not good enough, and what's wrong with you? And, and this sort of, you grow up like that. And even though they're like, oh, I had an IPO and I just pocketed $30 million, but I'm going to do I need $1 billion company. And it's like, what are you trying to prove? You're
Right.
awesome. You're great. You're capable. Your kids need you. Why don't you take a year off and go travel the world with your kids who you haven't seen the last 10 years because you've been so busy on this IPO, right? So being aware of that is just life altering. And so, because I did a lot of therapy and a lot of EMDR,
Right.
and what happens with EMDR is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And it's that, Susan, it takes a while for you to create this awareness and have the time or the energy to go to regular talk psychotherapy or your own journaling to understand these are my wounds. And in my experience, I married, and my first husband was an amazing man who did not hear me and did not hear what I had to say. And I realized through EMDR that was because I grew up with a father and a mother who didn't hear me. So I went and I married the same person, and I wasn't happy about it, but it was normal to me. It was very normal for me not to be heard.
Right.
So he'd be like, where do you want to go on vacation? I'm like, well, I want to go to Arizona or LA, or we're going to Miami. I'm like, we've been to Miami like 5 times in a row. Next day, oh, I booked us trips to Miami and we're staying at the Lowe's. I'm like, I just said I didn't want to do that. Right. And like that was everything in my life. So, but it takes the awareness of knowing, okay, this is what happens. But what we understand at a cognitive level doesn't mean we're healing it. We understand it, and that helps us make a lot of good decisions for ourselves. But to truly feel like I'm worthy and I'm worthy of being heard, you need to go deep and you need to go back and really go back to feeling what you felt when you were 8 and not heard, and how lonely it was. And you sadly have to cry and feel the pain to heal it and release it. And part of EMDR is reprocessing that after you cried and you healed it. I'm like, what? It really sucked and it was really sad. Then you reprocess it. And part of the therapy is like, okay, Karen, you're 45 years old. You're heard, you're seen, you're successful. What would you tell that 8-year-old Karen? How would you make her feel better? And then if something just clicks that you're not 8 anymore, you don't have to go through that anymore. And that you are healed. And so what happens is that, and EMDR has been highly researched with a 77% success rate, where you are healed. Like, it's not like you're giving yourself that verbal therapy every week. I'm great, I can do this. No, you feel like you can do this. And so it was my journey with doing a lot of EMDR therapy and somatic experiencing and healing that it's just, the return on investment is so amazing, that I'm on a mission through the podcast and the book and the coaching to help others arrive
Well,
at the same results.
I love that you point out. I remember a therapist saying to me many years ago, when I think it was when I first started going to therapy, that awareness is wonderful. I remember something becoming clear to me in a session, and I thought, wow, light bulb went off. That's taken care of. And his comment was, awareness is just the first step in the journey. And you just said that, being aware of the hurt from your past, or what occasioned it, definitely is a necessary part of that, but it is the first step to the journey. And what I love about you and what you've experienced and then share with people is you have all these different tools and modalities that can help people with that healing part of the journey. Because I will say, for my own experience, going back and re-experiencing the trauma that you need to go back. You said you have to go back to being 8 years old and feeling alone and bereft, or whatever that is. My situation was a PTSD situation from a plane crash. And I had to
Mm.
go back to that fear over and over again in
Mm.
that moment to deal with it, not where you want to go. But
No.
it wasn't doing me any good not to deal with it. And so, for everyone who's listening, who's feeling these things, understand that there is this difficult part of it. There's an awareness of the hurt, and then there's the journey to healing. But one of the things that you experienced and talk about so much are all these tools. You've mentioned one, EMDR. Can you explain a little bit more about what that is? Because I don't know that everyone understands it. I had never heard of it before it was brought in as a therapeutic tool for me.
So EMDR was created by a lady who actually just passed away last summer, Francine Shapiro, about 30 years ago, where she discovered that by bilaterally stimulating your eyesight and getting you to look from one side to the other, and they have different tools to get you to do that. It could be a tapper, it could be with your finger, and I'm showing you on the video, or they have actually lights. Getting that distraction and having your eyesight go back and forth somehow connects the cognitive part of your brain with the emotional part of your brain. So as we talk about, it takes a while to be aware of, okay, this happened to me and this was stressful. But to actually get back there and heal it and connect it with the memories and the root of where you started to feel that belief or that trauma or that hurt, we are, like Freud said, experts at resisting, experts at blocking, at repressing anything bad that happened to us. Right. And we are adaptable and survivors. And we like, oh, that happened. Sometimes we even carry it with honor. Oh, yeah, no, I was molested and look at me now. I'm doing great. Or so with EMDR, the process actually forces you to go back and actually bring things to memory that maybe we repressed, or come up with more things and actually also feel it in your body. So part of EMDR is like somatic experiencing, where it's like, where are you feeling that? Well, I have a headache, or in my ovaries, or I have a stomach ache, or in my arm. And allowing you to reprocess that trauma and really feel it, and you feel it. And so that's why I can help people, and I'm actually getting certified to help people deal with what we call small T traumas. And I suffer small T traumas that can actually be complex trauma, which is neglect. When you're made feel every day that you're not a priority, that the phone is more important, work is more important, and you don't spend enough time with your loved ones, you have this very inner thought that I'm not a priority and I'm not worthy. But those are still small T traumas, right? It's not sexual abuse. So small, like large T traumas, are emotion, physical abuse, being hit, being getting the belt, being repeatedly hit as a child,
Mhm.
sexual abuse, actually divorce is considered big T trauma, losing a parent to death or incarceration, growing up with an alcoholic or mental illness, including depression, growing up with a
Mhm.
depressive mother who wasn't there available for you. So when you had a trauma like yours, Susan, I could not help you. You need a therapist who's been trained, and so there's the EMDR Foundation called EMDRIA that certifies you, and there's 3 different levels where you establish a safety, right? And you have a lot of different coping mechanisms, so that because you might remember things that you've forgotten, and you might re-traumatize yourself, right? If it's big T trauma, a lot of, it's really sad, but like, I have the statistic somewhere here, like 1 out of 5 Americans were sexually molested by their uncles, by priests, by people they trusted, by their brother, by their cousins. And a lot of people, you forget about it, or you repress it, or you, so if that all comes out very clearly, that you need a safety mechanism, and you need a skilled professional to help you. um, and then so you relive it, and you feel it, and then through the whole technique you reprocess it, and you're like, okay, you're safe. And in your case, it's like, airplanes accidents are actually very random. And so you add the cognitive side, and you add like, okay, but you're safe. And 30,000 flights take off Chicago every day and nothing happens. And that's how you heal it. But sadly, and that's why it's painful and people resist it, you have to go back and refeel it and relive it and heal it. So in terms of different modalities in the podcast, I have 60 episodes, and they cover, there's about 8 of them on EMDR, what it is, how it works, how they're coupled with psychospiritual or spotting or RTT and hypnosis, and how hypnosis is another way of getting back there. Somatic experiencing, which is not the bilateral stimulation, but it really focuses on the body, because trauma comes back to you not as a memory, but as a response. So it's very clear in divorce, like when you have to go to a mediation with your ex, or you get a text and you all of a sudden get agitated and upset. That's a traumatic response. You don't remember exactly what happened, but it's a complex trauma when you have been living on eggshells and bombarded for 17 years. You get those reactions. So somatic experiencing is another one. I just had an episode released a few weeks ago on psychedelics, which is a bit controversial because it's illegal in most states in the United States, legal now in Oregon, and very well known of deep healing with the native communities all over the world. And he's the guest I had is from Amsterdam, where it's legal. And you have to go with a very knowledgeable, this guest I had, Natasha Pelgrim, has carried 500, psychedelics rituals. And it arrives at the same thing as EMDR, where you take a mushroom potion to go back there. And you actually relive, not just from, for example, I had a coaching client who I asked, tell me a bit about what was it like growing up with your mom and your dad and your siblings? She's like, I had a perfect childhood. I had a perfect childhood, like great mom, always there, constant. But she was suffering from this really negative self beliefs, and also divorce, and so blaming herself. And it's like when that happens, it happens at the non-verbal level and at the baby level. Not being grabbed when you're crying and being left in a car seat crying because, oh, she's just, I don't want to spoil her, let's cry. And you're sitting on a dirty diaper. That creates trauma, to feel like, what, I'm not important. I'm sitting on a dirty diaper. So psychedelics, actually, Gabor Mate is a specialist in this area. And he talks about being a doctor and being extremely unhappy and grumpy and cross with their wife and kids. And he did a lot of therapy to go like, why am I so miserable? And he, through psychedelics, which was his last resort, came back to the fact that he was a Holocaust survivor, and his mom gave him up to a family to take care of him to save his life. And he was left to cry for 3 months. The women had, 12 children,
Right.
and their job was to keep him alive, not to like nurture him and make him feel loved and cared for. So that's traumatizing enough. So, I mean, my purpose, and I have about 10 different episodes coming up with very different healing modalities out there and new stuff, just to increase awareness. And because what works for me might not work for you. I have clients I know that, experiment with drugs more than I ever even tried. And, they look at going to Amsterdam, and I'm like, oh, I can do that. But they're afraid of EMDR. So, or hypnosis or somatic, so, different strokes from different folks, but anything I can do to inspire people to heal and look deeper and get at the root is where the source of like sustainable happiness that I have experienced by remarrying an amazing man and really feeling like I deserve him. And because when you've been traumatized, you're like, do I deserve him? And, am I worthy of so much amazingness? And so I want everyone to get there as well.
Well, and that's, one of the things that I love is that one of the things that you do is connect people with all of these different modalities. Like people can come to you because, as you just said, you've got 60 some odd podcast episodes all on these different topics. There are a myriad of different ways to go through the healing process, and there are different strokes for different folks. Absolutely. But one of the things you can do is help people find the modality that's going to work best for them. But does that start with an exercise with you of sort of honing in on what the trauma is and the issues that need to be dealt with for the person?
Yes. So I start sort of the coaching session with the dream and the future and the exciting, both personally, relationship, whether you're married, or most of my clients happen to be divorced. So who is this amazing, great human being out there? What matters to you? What are your love languages? What are your triggers? What are your wounds? And then we do go back to the past. And I'm not a therapist, but I can understand trauma very well. And I do highlight and I write it down for them. These are your wounds. And this is why. This is what you shared with me. And this is your older brother. You always wanted to belong. You're the third child who got the hand-me-downs and and they're successful people. So this is not, because successful people have such a good coping mechanism to hide their trauma, they're actually successful. But even though they're successful, they're still afraid to ask for a raise. They're still unhappily married, taking so much crap from their spouse, because they don't feel worthy. They achieved, but that's not achievement, right? When you die, you're not going to look at and say, well, I published this many reports and I got closed this many deals and I litigated and no.
Right.
Were you happy?
Right.
Were you loved? Were you seen? Were you, right?
Yeah.
So yes, I help them identify. I then, depending on their budget, sadly, healing is expensive. Sadly, I have amazing guests who I would want to pair up. It's one of my biggest challenges, actually, that I want to pair them with a lot of the guests that you could hear her and just like, my God, she's amazing. Like Elizabeth Cohen, I had her as well. And actually, my episode is all about how she heals people with CBT and somatic experiencing. Highly recommended. It's amazing. And yeah, so I had a client that I just sent to her last Friday because she doesn't have a lot of trauma that we know about. Most of my clients is like very clear. She was bullied or she was a third child and really was neglected and leave my room and you're a pest and like that you carry your whole life. But with this client, she didn't exhibit any for me, we clearly said as traumatic experiences. But she needs cognitive behavioral therapy. So I have a lot of episodes on that to really mentally and cognitively reprocess. And I'm like, am I and understand it and give it a better language? And then I wanted her to work with her because she does need somatic. She does need to go back because if something happened to her, it was in the nonverbal stage. So I love therapists, and everyone I have in the show are people who do more, because I think that more modalities than just one, because it is when you marry all these different modalities, including prayer. I had a guest on prayer and spiritual healing, or an astrologer. Like when you, and yoga, it's amazing. So
Mhm.
when you combine all these modalities, that's when you take healing to like a rocket level.
Yeah.
But my biggest issue that I was going to say is that all these great people are $350 an hour, $400 an hour. And so um, trying to find equally skilled therapists that are not at that bracket, it's one of my biggest challenges, or that are available. So some people, I'm like, oh, you got to wait 4 months for a session. It's totally worth waiting, but it'd be great if you get help right now because you're suffering, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's unfortunately, as people get better and better at what they do, they're able to charge more and more, and
And
the
they deserve
demand
it.
for what they do. Yes. Oh, they absolutely deserve it.
Yeah. And it's worth
Uh,
every penny. And I say,
ev-
listen, stop drinking, buy less wine. Don't buy yourself that cute purse or that Canada Goose jacket. This, the return on investment, I tell you, when you're not triggered anymore and when you feel it, you're like, man, I know I stopped caught on a lot of places to pay for therapy. So, and it was worth it.
it's one of those, and even, for those listeners right now who are thinking of divorce or going through the divorce process, who are like, well, my attorney's costing a fortune, mediation's costing, or whatever that is. One thing I always try for people to understand is that getting a coach to help you with your issues, getting the right help and therapy or whatever it is that you need, is actually going to save you money in the divorce process. I can't emphasize that enough. I know I've been doing this for 30 some odd years. The cases where my clients are emotionally stuck and and living in the trauma day in and day
And in
out,
the
those are,
anger,
yeah, and in the, oh god, and in the anger or the fear or both. Then those are the cases where frankly I'm going to make the most money, not because I want to, but because dealing with those emotional clients who can't make decisions, or who are making very emotionally based decisions that are usually poor decisions because they're emotionally based, it's going to end up costing you more time, money, and frankly, reintroduce trauma, because that experience is traumatic. A divorce that is at that level of conflict is another traumatizing aspect of your life. It's just going to continue your cycle of trauma, not healing, which is what we're talking about here. So that was one of the things that jumped out at me most about your book, is it starts talking about healing long before you get into this process, because healing is something, I mean, do you know anyone out there who doesn't have something that they probably need some help healing from?
so it's funny. I start. I don't know if I mentioned it on the book, but for me, connections and friendships are really important. They drive me. They make me happy, and I have a lot of friends. And I could have a birthday party with 60 people here, and I get to know you, like to know you and who you are and your childhood, and then through time, I get to know your parents. And I mention it a lot that if I have 60 couples that I know, so 120 people that I know really well, maybe four of them had a perfect childhood where they say it, you see it. I've met the parents. I love them. They're like my parents now. And they were the only people, Susan, that clearly married the right person in their 20s, have an amazing career where they know what they want, they know what it's worth, and you see it and clearly. But the other, 56 of them, and I think that's a very fair statistic, no. And I have a lot of friends who, and people very close to me who, even though I think trauma is one of the biggest equalizers, by the way, white, black, rich, poor. I know a lot of high net worth people who were sexually molested by their uncle, by their priest, who suffer this kind of trauma. One of my latest posts in Christmas, actually, we saw the movie Home Alone, which was a very high net worth family in Chicago.
Yes.
Actually, my ex in my husband's neighborhood in Wilnett, and he's like, "That was the church I went." That's trauma, being the fifth kid. And he's like, you're a pest, you're insignificant, you're useless. And your uncle tells you this, your siblings tell you that, your parents leave you. That is complex trauma for you.
Right. Taking
So yeah, I,
taking
I
the
personally feel that the overwhelming majority of us can benefit from healing, even if it's a small thing. It stops you from suffering. um, it could be very small things, like EMDR is known for traumatic events, but I've used it in my life. So going back to your comment, when I first got separated, a lot of anger, and a lot of my ex was very upset, and he had all the right to be. And it was that week or two that we contacted the mediator, and that he started telling him all this sob story about how I left and I met this person, and it's like a $4,000 bill. And I'm like, oh my God, we saw you once, we met twice, so that's 600 an hour. Why 4,000? And she sent me this email. Like, and after that, I went to therapy twice a week, which was expensive. It was like 250 an hour. And after that first mediation thing, our entire divorce cost $5,000, which that's nothing.
that is nothing. Yeah.
Why? Because we healed, and he went to therapy too. We healed our anger. We both understood why the marriage failed. My ex, who I left for another man without planning to, who you would think hate me, Italian background, you would think, passionate and loud. And he came to me after 5 sessions of his own therapy and said, Karen, I take full responsibility. I didn't hear you. I wasn't emotionally attached to you. We didn't have a secure relationship. Everything I had been telling him because of therapy. So when it came to negotiate our mediation agreement, it was with love and care. And we became best friends from probably the first month after the original separation. And it's amazing. And that's why I call the book An Amazing Divorce. And my original Instagram was, it's just amazing to see how happy the kids are, how we never fight, how we share time together, how we're there for each other. Then the actual divorce became amazing. I had all my friends jealous. I want to get divorced because I had one night off every other night to be myself, to have wine, to go out with my friends. We had a buddy to, hey, can you take the kids to ballet today? Hey, you have more resources, time, and even money to care for the kids.
Right.
We had step parents who are like amazing to them, doing homework or teaching them things you don't teach them, or taking them horseback riding or in the subway, which I hate. Like, it became amazing, not that I condone divorce, but if that's where you have to go, why not do it with intention?
Well, and
And
why not make it amazing, right?
right, if
Instead of
that's
the
where you have
worst.
to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's well, I encourage everyone. How can they get a copy of your book, Karen?
You can go to Amazon and look for An Amazing Divorce. And my website is being launched in a few weeks, healing.net, healing without the G. And you'll be able to find a podcast with all of the different episodes to inspire you to heal. And you can read the book. You can find resources. I'm putting together a list of resources for divorce, trauma, better marriage, better parenting. Um, or you can work with me one-on-one, which I kind of hold your hand and take the healing process into a faster level.
Well, which again, money spent up front to make the process work better, faster, and smoother is something I always advise. So I will put the link to the book, the link to the website, all of your information, Karen's bio, everything in the show notes. I highly encourage everyone who is sitting, this isn't just an episode for divorce, and you are not an expert for just for divorce. That happens, as you said, to be a big T trauma. But 56 out of the 60 people have something that needs healing. So I highly encourage everyone to reach out for the resources, read the book. It's a journey in and of itself. And it leaves you feeling amazing. So I love the title, is An Amazing Divorce. And Karen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Susan. I am so honored and excited to be here.